In the wise words of Joe March, women. Hi, hello, how are you? I'm Alex. If you're new here, it's nice to meet ya. And if you're coming back, we're best friends now. Thank you so much for your support. It means so much to me, you don't even know. So, the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist was announced at the end of April. 6 books were announced, and the finalist will be announced on Wednesday, June 15th. So I put it upon myself to read all of the shortlist books and make a decision, even though I'm not a judge and my opinion means nothing. I read all 6 books, and I'm about to share my unpopular opinions as well as my regular opinions that you didn't want, but I'm gonna give you anyway. These are also not in any particular order. This is just the order that I got them from the library, and thus the order I read them in. The first book is The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth OZEKI. Interesting premise. It's about this boy Benny who starts to hear voices after his father passes away suddenly. And it's a cool narration style in the sense that we have an outside perspective, so we see everything that's going on. And we also have an inside perspective of Benny's head, but not his thoughts, but the voice in his head. You still with me? Does that make sense? It was pretty interesting in the beginning. It had me hooked. And this is the first OZEKI book that I've read, so I was intrigued because I've heard good things about her works. However, after about 350 pages, it started to lose me. It really did. This is a long book. It's over 500 pages. And I just found it got really repetitive and really dense. And I did not understand the purpose of the story anymore. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but I also did not enjoy the ending. So, although this is a strong start, it did not finish strong. It felt kind of flat for me. So I gave it a 2.5 out of 5-star rating. After that, I read Great Circle by Maggie Shipstead, which I loved. I love a good literary adventure. One of my favorite books growing up was the Airborne trilogy by Kenneth Opel, which is this steampunk story that mixes science and flying. And Great Circle is about Marianne, who becomes obsessed with flying. She really wants to fly a plane. And eventually she learns how to fly a plane and she becomes a really good flyer. And she flies in the war and she wants to make a great circle, a trip around the world. Few people have done it, as in 0, because when people reach Antarctica, they usually die, considering it is an absolute wasteland. She wants to do it. She loves flying, and she figures if she's gonna die anyway, that might as well be the way she goes. This story is good. It is pretty fast-paced, and it is kind of gay. So, however, it is very long. It's over 700 pages. And what I didn't understand was the now narration part of it, because it flashes back and forth, and the current, the present day narration is Hadley, who is this kind of washed up movie star who's playing Marianne in a biopic of her life. There were some vague resemblances between their lives, but I didn't see the connection, didn't understand the purpose. That could have been taken out and it could have just been a great historical fiction book. So for that reason, it was a 4 out of 5 for me. After that, I read my favorite on this list, which was The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. And this is the story of Tuki, who has 2 important sentences in her life. First, her prison sentence, and second, a sentence in a book. Tuki is this super fun, lovable, interesting, smart character who is occasionally extremely relatable. She works in this indie bookstore with a bunch of friends of hers who are also a great cast of characters. And this indie bookstore, I think they predominantly sell indigenous written work. And then one day Tuki starts to be haunted by one of her most annoying customers. And Tuki does not want to be haunted. No thank you. She wants to get rid of this ghost and she has no idea how. And she goes on all kinds of misadventures. It was interesting because I wasn't sure how I'd feel about this book because it is set in present time. So COVID does happen in this book, and I'm usually about media that kind of uses COVID for content. I already lived it. I'm not trying to live it again, you know what I'm saying? But this was actually done really well, and it was a 5 out of 5 for me. It's a perfect book for book lovers, and it comes with 8 pages of reading recommendations at the end. After that, I read Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason, which is the most popular of these books. I think it's the one that's most voted to be like the winner of the Women's Prize or something like that. Like, most people love this book the most. And I know people that have given this 5 stars, 4 stars, people that have loved it. I thought I was gonna love it because, I mean, it's an unhinged woman. Where can you go wrong with that? But I'm not gonna lie to you guys. It wasn't my favorite. It really wasn't. I thought that they depicted mental illness really well, and like the characters were realistic, the circumstances were realistic, and like the conclusion of the story was realistic. However, I felt that this story done in this way has been done so many times before that it didn't bring anything new for me. Maybe that's my problem, but I feel like this just really missed the mark for me. I can understand why people like it, why people loved it. This was like 2.5, 3 out of 5 stars for me. I'm like bouncing between the 2.5 and the 3. I'm not really sure where I land. And then I read The Island of Missing Trees by ELIF SHAFAK, which is magical realism, plants, interesting narration, cool historical fiction galore. This is a story of Ada, right? I think it's Ada. And it's a story of kind of like how her parents met. And her parents met in Cyprus during a time of civil unrest between the Greeks and the Turks, her father being a Greek man and her mother being a Turkish woman. So there was some drama, and there was like a lot going on. Their families did not want them to be together. They, like, people on the island, like, they had to hide from them and stuff because, like, if they were seen together, there would be problems. Lots of trauma happened during those times. This book is beautiful. It's extremely beautifully written. I think the history is very well approached. It's a really interesting narration style in the sense that, like, we see the perspective of the past, we see Ada's perspective, and then some chapters are told in first person from the perspective of a fig tree that belongs to her father that he planted in the backyard and brought with him to England all the way from Cyprus. So as someone who loves plants, I am a little bit biased in how I feel about this, but I think this is the kind of book that everyone can get behind. It's a great literary story. It's beautifully written, like warm honey dripping off the page are those words. It's like, it's just so good, so sweet. Really interesting characters, really interesting plot, lots of history, so many interesting like stories interwoven with each other. I really think this is the kind of book that anyone can fall in love with, and for that reason, I gave it a 5 out of 5. Lastly, I read The Bread the Devil Need by Lisa allen-agostini. And this book has been recommended so many times by Jack Ben Edwards. I swear he's been talking about it every single day on social media, telling all of us to read it. And alas, I have finally read it. It was the last book to come to me from the library because they had like 5 copies or something insane like that. And I was one of many holds, but I finally got my e-copy. And at first I was a little wary because I wasn't used to this kind of narration style. Like the way that this was written isn't something that I usually read or something that usually like draws me in. However, the story seriously drew me in, and I'm really glad that I stuck with it. This is an incredible book, a very powerful story. It is incredibly well written. There are so many lines in this book that I was like, that blew my mind, broke my heart, and like, you know, all at once. I was at a loss for words when I finished reading it. The main character is a really interesting character, and she has some seriously relatable moments. Like, it follows the trauma of her past, how she dealt with it, how she reflects on it, and how she builds towards a future, like, despite her trauma, while reconciling what happened with her. And there's a lot of character development, and it's really interesting to see the way Alethea, the main character, grows on her own, as well as within her relationships with other people, like people in her family and her friends. And it's a really interesting story. And just, I think it's really unique too. Definitely check the trigger warnings. This one has the biggest trigger warnings for me, but I recommend checking the trigger warnings before you read any of these, although there are certain trigger warnings that I would consider to be spoilers for this book specifically, and maybe Great Circle. Anyway, I give The Bread the Devil Need a 4 out of 5 stars. Incredible book. Highly recommend it. Now, like I said, The Sentence was my personal favorite. I really love that book. That book made me excited about reading. It made me excited to go home, be done with work, just like crawl into my bed, curl up, and read. I read it in like 3-4 days, I think. However, based on my assessment of what other people read, what has won the Women's Prize for Fiction in past years, and putting aside my personal preference, I predict that The Island of Missing Trees by ELIF SHAFAK is going to win this year. Could I be wrong? Absolutely. I have been proven wrong many times before in my life. Are we shocked? No, we're not. It is very possible, it is highly probable actually, that I am wrong. But this is just my prediction, and I have reasons to back it up. It's just that I feel that this is a very accessible book. It's a very accessible story written in a way that I think many different people would appreciate. And I know the only people judging and making the decision are the judges on the panel, but I think considering probably the majority of preferences and perspectives that they have on that panel, I have a feeling that The Island of Missing Trees will work for more people than any of the other books. Am I just predicting the fact that it's a popular book? Maybe. Although Sorrow and Bliss has shown itself to be the most popular among these 6, which is like, but maybe I'm just being a hater. It is, I've been known to do that. So yeah, that's my opinion. Take it or leave it. I mean, we'll find out in 3 days anyway. I'm really looking forward to seeing who's the winner. This is the first time I've ever read like all the shortlist books before a finalist was announced. So I'm like kind of at the edge of my seat, like excited to figure out who it was. We'll see if I'm right, and if not, who cares? I read 6 really interesting, really diverse books written by a bunch of extremely talented people. Thank you for watching this video. Comment down below what you think the winner of this Women's Prize for Fiction is going to be if you read any of these. Comment your favorite one if you want. Like this video if you like this video. Subscribe to my channel if you want. And I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.